to Powertalk Live. We broadcast live on Power 106 FM and Jamaica News Network, JNN. We combine radio and television to give you the best of both media. I'm your host, Ronald Thwaites, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ralston Hyman of Real Business. We start as usual with the bottom line. Ralston, greetings.
Morning, Ronnie. How are you doing?
I'm thoughtful. Our practice on the bottom line is to take the news of the day and draw the underlying conclusions about it. Here's the story on the front page then of the Daily Observer of a young man, 17 years old, and he wants to go back to school, but he doesn't have a birth certificate. Yeah. He was never registered, apparently.
Okay.
A situation, not surprising, of abject poverty.
Yes.
Yes, and family chaos. But then, why keep him out of school because he doesn't have a birth certificate? He's a human being.
Right, and that shouldn't be something that is hard to solve.
Put the boy in school and then solve the problem of the birth certificate afterwards.
Yes.
Don't put conditions in front of what is obviously the most important task, which is to get the boy literate and educated.
President Obama would say, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good.
Well, there you go.
Right.
Now, but we have a mentality in Jamaica that says, oh no, unless you have done this, then you can't access that. There is no concept of the greater good.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there is too limited a concept of the common good.
Precisely.
And therefore, we raise all kinds of obstacles from doing things that are really very important.
So hold back rather than facilitate. Power is used to disable rather than to enable.
I had a situation where it was reported to me.
Yes.
I have I wasn't there myself, but where a criminal was being chased by the police. But when they reached the parish border, a certain police stopped.
Yes.
Because they said they couldn't go any further. It was outside of their jurisdiction.
Okay.
No, I'm sure that should have been changed or didn't exist.
Yes.
But the mentality is what bothers me.
Yes, yes,
yes.
Yes.
If there's a greater good in apprehending this person, but he crosses out of the jurisdiction in which you are assigned, carry on and curb that one afterwards, if at all.
Right.
But look at this one. This is a human situation.
Yeah. And education.
You know how many people are denied a little work, a little contract, the payment for something done because they haven't got a TRA, because they haven't got a birth certificate. That is foolishness. This is nonsense. And
disabling rather than enabling.
Yeah. And while we want and recognize, everybody does, the importance of a national identification system, yes? A situation where you are going to be denied basic services because you do not have
Total nonsense.
It's utterly unnecessary.
Yeah, total.
Give me the service and then tell me bring the thing afterwards.
Right.
Yes?
Yes.
Because
the greater good is providing the service.
Sometimes you have, I saw it a couple of days ago, you have the police stopping a traffic offender and blocking up 2 lines of traffic.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
And for a long time, while they interrogate, determine whether to ticket or
concept
charge
of efficiency.
or anything else.
Yes.
Get out of the way.
Yes. Agreed.
Say, follow me to the police station or to the nearest lay-by.
Yes.
But get out of the way so that people can carry on their lives. But there's a sense of self-importance.
Yes.
There's a sense that I can do this.
Yes.
And that is something that I think you will tell us cripples productivity and therefore cripples economic growth.
Well, I saw a clip from RJ News yesterday where Minister Favour Williams, she was speaking at the Make Your Mark Consultant Seminar, and she was speaking about the importance of productivity to inflation containment.
Oh, I'm so glad that she's called
Precisely, finally. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
Yes. So we want to spread that nationally.
We do this by being efficient in small matters.
Precisely. Because it adds up.
It adds up.
Yes.
Okay, important observation.
Yes.
So then, we really want to use the bottom line this morning to say, get out of your own and other people's ways.
Yes.
This doesn't mean lawlessness.
No.
It doesn't mean anything goes.
No.
Yes?
No.
But it does mean that if you are exercising some autonomy, authority, power, you do it in a way that enables human uplift.
Precisely.
Rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, this is it. The other issue that struck me again, we take the news and we go to the principles behind it, is this issue of, in my view, the kind of madness about the potential of ganja.
Yes.
I have I was part of the lawmaking group that relaxed the law on possession of small quantities and opened the way for medical marijuana use in Jamaica. Support those. But listen to Wayne Golding of the diaspora, Jamaican Diaspora Committee in the United States. If you think that your use of marijuana in Jamaica is not going to have an effect on your capacity to travel to the United States, you better think again.
Yes.
If you have used it and they catch it in your blood system when they take your blood test,
yes,
preparatory to a certain kind of visa,
right,
you're not going to get it. Yes?
Yes.
If you have been ticketed, although there's no ticketing, that's a sham.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
It's going to affect you also. And it is quite clear that any infraction of any sort is going to be used to your detriment when in fact you apply, yes, for what for many is a very important perquisite, a visa to the United States.
Yes, yes.
And it relates to, so we need a caution about with this euphoria, yes, about ganja.
Yes.
Ganja free? Okay, weed free? Well then be careful about if you want to go to the United States.
Yes.
And if you are if you're a company dealing in that product, as Mr. Golding has said, and he knows the law, yes, be careful of your banking arrangements.
Yes, because it's still a federal, it's still a federal offense.
And there are a number of existing interstate offenses,
yes,
that while it may appear that they are decriminalizing recreational use, yes, there are other statutes which have not been changed, yes, and which will catch you.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Particularly if you are immigrant and black.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
When it comes to that kind of
right
thing. So let us just get off the euphoria. Mr. Shaw, you're on the ganja train. Maybe you're the driver. I wonder. I doubt it. But let us be realistic about that, and let us ensure that we don't think that we don't overreach.
Yeah, and the prospects as a foreign exchange earner. Yeah.
Well, so that's because more and more I hear the argument that this is some silver bullet for Jamaica's economy, and it's not.
It's not.
Yes. So let us put it in proper context,
precisely,
in proper size.
Don't oversell it.
Yeah, and it's really a pity that the political culture doesn't lead on this point,
yes,
and rather lead positively. Unfortunately, rather encourages a misdirected position on that issue. Okay, the other thing that is drawing me from external sources. Here we have, if you've been watching the news from the United States, of a most artful, in my view, successful but perfidious deflection from the issues of that great country, yes, to the diversion about this invasion of immigrants from, yes, Central America. Yes. Here you have the most nasty prejudice being evinced by the mass shooting in Philadelphia, in right, Pittsburgh. And that suddenly becomes of less importance than this invasion of migrants who are still more than 1,000 miles away from the Mexican border.
Yes.
It's a diminishing quantity,
right,
and but which is now forming part of the Trump-inspired paranoia, yes, about invasion by wicked people, right, into the United States. Believe me, if ever there was a story of fake news, yes, he's the apostle of that, the evangelist.
Problem is not working. The president's approval rating has dropped by 4.4 percentage points since last week, going into the midterm elections next week, Tuesday. So the projections are that he's going to lose control of the lower house of Congress. He might barely hang on to the Senate. But that strategy is not working. It's getting pushed back, and yes, his approval rating is dropping.
I'm not a betting man,
yes,
but I have a feeling that Middle America, which is very ill-informed,
yes,
is very likely to be conned into believing that there is some external threat coming from the South.
Well, it hasn't taken all that, and there are just a couple of days left before the election.
I hope you're right.
I'm willing to wager that he's going to lose control of the lower house of Congress.
We better be careful to make a bet on the air, because we don't have a license from what it is.
For a bet, it gave it a logic.
but let's
well, I'm projecting.
Yes, okay. But there's something deeper. Yeah. Because what is the future of population movements what do we see over the last few years that we need to speak to our viewers and listeners about? You have a cessation of aid and developmental finance from the north to the south.
Yes.
And what we used to get short listeners from the British, from the Americans, from the French, from the Dutch has gone down.
Yes.
We have spoken on this program up to yesterday about the Chinese.
Yes.
And of course that's very, very important. But the truth is that for many, there has been the experience of corruption, of violence in their countries. We're thinking of Central America, of Central and North Africa.
Yeah.
And the allurement of moving to Europe, given Mrs. Merkel's open door up to recently.
Yes.
And the United States open arms, the Statue of Liberty, remember. Millions have moved. But can this continue? And is there is involuntary migration some kind of payback for years of underdevelopment? How can it be assuaged? In the United States alone, we know that by 2040, Black and Latinos will in fact probably be a majority of the population.
Yes.
This changes a whole social fabric.
Yes.
And will have great effect on economic strength as well.
Certainly. And I don't think that is something that can be pushed back, no matter what you see the Donald doing, no matter what you hear from Mr. Bolsonaro in Brazil. This is something that cannot be stopped. The majority of the people of the world and the majority of the leaders want to see free movement of people. One of the reasons for globalization is that despite the inequity and the choppy economic growth, it increases the production and consumption possibilities of the world's population. The Chinese have brought some 400 million people out of poverty because of globalization, and that is why Xi Jinping has volunteered himself to be the General Secretary of Globalization. So this is a relentless process that no matter what the Donald does, it cannot be stopped. Right now we're seeing that
Let me hold you. We need to take the break to be on time.
Yes.
And then we'll come back to this important discussion. What's the future of population movements in the world? This is the bottom line. Welcome back to Power Talk Live. We're in the bottom line. So, the movement of the world's population,
yes,
inexorably, because of the failure of the liberal development prospects in the South.
Yes.
Many people are opting to move to the North, no matter what the costs, no matter what the disabilities.
Yes.
Again, the three lines before the U.S. Embassy this morning.
Yes.
And every day you see the best, the youngest, probably the most educated and talented Jamaicans opting to move.
Yes.
Not all of them will stay, but most of them will want to.
Right.
We have the poll statistics from Bill Johnson to confirm this.
Yes.
There are limits, aren't there?
Yeah, well, people will always be moving from one point to another globally. No matter what people like the Donald does, no matter what people like Mr. Bolsonaro does, no matter what you see, those movements are getting more popular in Europe. This is like a phase. The whole thing about globalization, its impact on the international economy is not going to change.
So how does the South develop, Ralston Hammond? How do the nations of the South develop if they continue to disgorge the best of their talent on a consistent basis to the North? It's just by remittances, which is what is keeping us alive in Jamaica now?
Yeah, well, that's a fundamental problem. So, I mean, leadership in that region will have to also find ways to have more inclusive development, because part of the problem is the lack of inclusive growth and a lack of inclusive development in the South.
Many of our people, our governors at the present time, do not accept that.
Right.
They don't understand it.
Yes.
Their view is that so long as somebody gets something and I'm credited for it, it's okay.
Yeah.
You need to realize that if you don't broker development in an inclusive way, reducing inequality,
yes,
rather than ignoring it and expanding it,
yes,
then in fact it is going to come back to you and bite you.
Precisely.
Because your markets, your own profits are bound to be contracted, except, of course, you have the options of extortion, like some people in the financial sector here do.
Yes.
And even then, that has to be short-lived.
Short-lived. So we have to change the way we think development and have a more inclusive type of development, because part of the panic voting that you're seeing is because of the high levels of inequality in these countries, places like Brazil and other countries. So you see the panic voting, people going to the far right because they just feel very disgruntled and frustrated with the system, the way the thing is being done at this particular point in time. So there has to be a rethinking of development, as Professor Blanchard contended.
What would be the signs of that? The news is yesterday that many of those 800 students, for example, who are being deregistered, their situation is being saved. It is like a recurring decimal each year. Instead of making provisions, we hurry and scurry and turn over everything when the problem arises.
Precisely.
As if it's not going to happen again. It strikes me that fundamental policy changes are required. And a level of cooperation in order to ensure that they will prevail over all difficulties, vicissitudes, changes of personnel, administration, etc. But we have to have some firm commitment. Having a population which is all the more tertiary educated is a national good.
Precisely.
And therefore, proper arrangements must be made, can be made. And therefore, it can't be a happenstance thing that you, at the end of the day, when you disturb people's progress towards their examination and put them out the door, you hurry to find a way to let them in through the back door.
Precisely. That is not going to work. Macroeconomic policy will now have to be focusing more on the social and economic issues. Issues like integrated rural development through agriculture, proper public transportation system, more facilities in relation to education, particularly at the technological level. Those are things that macroeconomic policy will have to focus on.
No, hold on. I can't believe that you just said that. Say it again for me. Macroeconomic policy will have to be focused on those things, not just on the calibration of exchange rates and interest rates and investment flows.
Precisely. And EPOC will have to stop reporting just on aggregates, macroeconomic aggregates.
They are so technical as to be barren and to be useless if beyond a certain point. I don't wish to be unfair. So, but is that prescription that you have just made, is that in any sense widely understood, generally accepted? Because someone listening would think that you are being unduly preoccupied with social conditions, when in fact all that matters really is where the money comes from.
No, but economics is fundamentally about the people, and if you're not properly utilizing the people and the land, then you're going to have a serious problem. You're not going to develop, and then you're going to have the problems that you're talking about, the light and embassy.
The crime problem that we are talking about with Mr. Mark Shields in a few minutes' time is directly affected by this.
Precisely. Things like those.
Yes. And if we keep on our stupidity of keeping this man out of school, because he doesn't have a birth certificate.
Precisely.
Yes? Then you could have put all the money that Mr. Shields and others and ourselves would like to see in that for national security.
Precisely.
We're putting it for naught, because we will be churning out these individuals one after the other.
Yes, and I fundamentally believe that a significant portion of the national security budget should be related to things like education, infrastructural development, education, training opportunities.
Yes, a fixed amount.
Yes, fundamental if we're going to deal with the problem. It can't be just about buying police cars and improving police stations and all of those things. Those things are good, but these are the foundation stones.
Well, if you think of it, that's what enlightened people in the security industry have been telling us in the police force for weeks, for months. We haven't necessarily been following them. If you look at the emphasis when you're discussing we are discussing these states of emergency or zones, at the time, the effort and the money put on policing versus social regeneration, you will see the vast, disproportionate, lopsided approach. And then we are so half blind that when it doesn't work or works only temporarily, We celebrate that as if that's a final victory.
And still come back and ask for more,
And
while the
still come back and
IDB is
ask for
telling
more.
us that you're wasting money.
Yeah, which I find embarrassing that somebody from outside has
Yeah.
to tell us what we know should be done.
Yeah.
All right, so we always want to proceed on very positive and optimistic lines here. So we need to say, bureaucracy, we've always said, everybody says, needs to be dismantled
Yes.
where it is not helpful.
Right.
But we have done very little to do that.
it.
Yes,
Right.
we defend it
Right.
on every occasion. You know, there's a verve in government and opposition circles now that I can tell you about improving the capacity to deal with land
Yes.
in Jamaica.
Yes. Very important.
But it's not going to happen.
Yes.
I can tell you it is not going to happen because there are officials who are holding on to the old antiquated notions of how you develop land, what are the prerequisites required,
Yes.
that will prevent that.
Okay.
Listen, just take the example. In 2008, Bruce Golding, Prime Minister then, made the fundamental and praiseworthy statement that you ought to separate the issuance of a title
Yes.
from the infrastructural prerequisites.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
This is now 10 years later,
And nothing has changed.
and nothing has changed,
Yes.
and we are still imposing conditions that prevent the use of land.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Because
And-
of the infrastructure
And
requirements
yes,
for the
and,
title.
and making no financial opportunities
Yeah.
for that,
Yes.
even if you wanted to keep it that way.
Yes.
And prime ministers, even prime ministers, can you imagine, can state policy, which they are consistently unable to
To
implement.
implement. Yeah.
Unable to
Yeah.
implement.
Yes.
And what then is bureaucracy, history, a history, for example, of land law,
Yes.
which was artfully, carefully, purposefully designed in order to protect private property
Yes.
rather than enable people,
People to
to
own
participate
property.
in private property.
Yes. Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Becomes the act of God,
Yes.
unchangeable.
Yes.
And you could say all you want about it, Mr. Golding, Mr. whoever it is in office. It does not happen.
Yes.
Now, we then become the architects of our own misfortune.
Destruction. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes? And but people, one of the things that I implore people listening to us, viewing us, to be aware of is the connectivity of things. Yes? Because we can find every reason why Raheem Powell needs a birth certificate.
Before he can go into
But
school.
we find less reasons for the absolute imperative of him getting an education.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Now, he fortunately got down to carry water, as him say. Look at his English at this age, at the cross-country run in Portmore. And he eventually gets a medal. Now, thank God he's not, he's an exception.
Yes.
But there are too many exceptions
Yeah, man,
like
that's
this.
madness. That's madness.
Yes?
In 2018.
Yeah. In Jamaica, bright as anything,
Yeah.
able to lead the world in so many areas.
Yes.
And some of these obvious changes that are needed.
Simple things. Yes.
Are not. But so we can argue who should be first in the kingdom, who should be minister of what, or chairman of this, or who is prettier than who, and who can take off more clothes and display what they want, and what all sort of diversions. But the basic things
Yeah.
about security, about education, and about health. do not
Prosperity,
receive
inclusive prosperity.
inclusive prosperity. We're on the bottom line. This is Power 106. Thanks very much for listening to us this morning. Your comments are more than welcome. When we come back, we'll be joined by security consultant Mark Shields. He was former Deputy Commissioner of Police, and we'll discuss his Caribbean International Network's lecture in New York recently, where he highlighted ways to improve, not the Jamaican Constabulary Force, the whole climate of security in Jamaica. We'll be back. Every year, Caribbean News Network in New York, that's Stephen Hills and Ronnie Nazarala's operation, put on an important lecture where they take a Jamaican concern and a Jamaican speaker and expose him or her to the diaspora in New York, that group of fervent Jamaicans who know where their navel string is buried and who never forget, no matter how many years they are abroad. This year, the CIN lecturer was security consultant Mark Shields, former Deputy Commissioner of Police, and he joins us this morning to talk about what he said and his general views on how we're going to make Jamaica a secure and peaceful place. Mark Shields, welcome.
Good morning,
Happy
gentlemen.
to have you.
Morning, Mark.
Good. Well, tell us, what was your reception in New York?
I'm pleased to say it was a packed house,
Yes.
500 people, and I was honoured to actually do this because I think I'm the first non-Jamaican to actually perform, to be invited to give the lecture, which I do consider to be a great honour.
Hear this man now. They're talking about being a non-Jamaican. You have enough curry powder in your blood now that we've criminalised you entirely.
I do have a Jamaican wife and a child, so I guess I qualify.
Yeah,
but even so, I did
Mhm.
consider it to be an absolute honour because when you look at the list of people that had previously given the lecture, yeah, it was an honour.
Okay.
Mark Shields, the press has reported some pretty scathing criticisms that you are reported to have made about the body that you were a part of, the Jamaica Police Force, the Jamaica Constabulary. We've been talking about reforming the police force for a long while. I gathered from your remarks and from other things we're hearing, it hasn't happened. What are we to expect? Do you see a verve for reform now, or do we have to look in different ways, areas?
Well, I'd start by saying this. I saw the Gleaner headline on Friday, and there was a little bit of imbalance there, as there can be at times, because I spoke for over 45 minutes. My transcript consists of about 10,000 words. And although I was critical in some ways of the Jamaican Constabulary Force, I also talked about the many good things that are going on. And unfortunately, they were not published. So I felt that it was a slightly imbalanced example of what I actually said. Yes, we all know, and I think we're all tired of talking about the bad points of the Jamaican Constabulary Force. We know there's corruption. One doesn't have to be a former Deputy Commissioner to know that. We know that there are bad cops, but we also know that there are many who go to work day in and day out, put their lives on the line and do a really good job. I also said, which was not reflected in the article initially, that I think that Commissioner Tony Anderson is doing a great job at the moment. He is supported by DCP Selvin Hay, other DCPs, and I think there's a new emphasis on fighting crime, because in the past there has been this focus on operational policing, kicking in doors, taking people into custody, and I'm seeing a phase now whereby they're having results by gathering good evidence and actually getting people in custody for the right reasons. So lots of good things going on.
I'm sure how can you... Sorry, Raston.
Yeah, one thing that we saw recently, going back to that, we saw some 11,000 persons being rounded up and only 400 being charged. That would suggest that we are really getting down to that level in terms of moving on the basis of intelligence.
You're talking about the state of emergency specifically.
Yeah.
That was my question too.
Yeah, and I understand that. I understand as well that although initially those figures, which were of course alarming, did happen, I think the situation is quite different now on two levels. One is they're not arresting 11,000 people a month or whatever. They appear to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, and they had to go through that process to do it because we're in really difficult times. This is like a 9/11 every 2 years. You know, we're not talking about living in England, this green and pleasant land. We're in a place at the moment where within the time I've lived in Jamaica, 20,000 people have been murdered. This is not normal. So when I hear you say, Ralston, with respect, about the 11,000, I'm prepared to be locked up for 24 hours and to run my finger data. I would do it because I think we're in a crisis. And unless we take these measures and also have a backstop, which is some good social intervention afterwards, we have to go through this process.
Which we don't have.
Precisely.
Well, I think we do. I think
we have effective social intervention?
I think it started.
Oh, really?
I do.
Like what?
I do think the process has started because when we get past the 11,000 and when we say, oh, well, only X amount of guns have been recovered, we have to look at the work of the Social Intervention Committee. We have to look at how many miles of zinc fence have disappeared, how many people are being trained, how many people are now paying GPS light bills, how many babies
and I think
have
you
now
should look
got
at that, and you
that's not a lot.
You might find the numbers aren't impressive.
Yes.
But let's ask you this: if in fact you seem to be saying, look here, Jamaica, get used to states of emergency, get used to giving up some of your constitutional rights. It's worthy if, in fact, it's going to keep the lid on crime. And that seems to be your approval of the existing police strategy.
I don't agree, Ronnie, with the keeping a lid on it. I don't want to keep the lid on it.
Yeah.
I want it to be solved. I want us to find long-term solutions.
Oh.
And I feel that in the interim, this period, the short to medium term, unfortunately, this, whether we like it or not, is working.
Some of us, Mark Shields, and I'm not pulling rank or age on you
Absolutely.
at all, but you know,
Absolutely.
we've been in this argument since 1974 and the Suppression of Crime Act.
Yeah,
it isn't working. It just isn't working.
Would you say that the last 20 years since that time of the Suppression Act, do you really think that either the People's National Party or the Jamaica Labour Party have got on top of this thing? Have any of them got to a situation where they haven't?
So. Yeah.
And when I spoke in my lecture,
I don't think this is the way.
Let's go on to this, because we've got a limited amount of time. And I want to give you an example that I gave that has not been published particularly well. At the moment, across the world, it is normal that when a person is arrested for a crime and charged with a crime, their fingerprints are taken, their photograph is taken, and their DNA swab is taken. That is not happening in Jamaica in 2018.
Agreed.
We need a superintendent's authority to take fingerprints or a court's authority, which is not happening.
Why?
Because
I've never heard in my years of practice a court turn down an application for a fingerprint.
But it shouldn't be, Ronnie, that they have to go and get an application. It should be, as everywhere else, a matter of course that once a person is charged, the officer in the case takes the fingerprints, takes the photograph, which is not being done, and the DNA sample.
So whether you're charged or not,
done.
you ought to give those things.
I believe that when you're charged, those things should happen.
And I'm sharing with you an experience I have, that is universal. Anytime a person is charged, therefore they have to be brought before a court. That is I've never heard an order like that refused. Now, if you want to make it explicit that this ought to be done for every person charged,
Absolutely.
I would say fine. But
Absolutely.
I don't really know that can be an impediment. That is well, you from your experience, let me ask you, is the absence of that an impediment to proper detection?
Absolutely right. You take the case that, of course, was not raised. I raised the case of Ananda Dean.
Yes.
Ananda Dean was killed in 2008 under the most brutal circumstances. Terrible. Her body was found in a precipice some 2 weeks after. Her books were found strewn along the road before that in Pembroke, I think it was Pembroke Hall. Her clothes were recovered. All of those are DNA opportunities in 2008. If we had had this legislation in place 10 years ago, and if every single person arrested for crime had a sample taken, there is an opportunity there that we could have solved that case. And I gave numerous examples during the CIN lecture where 30, 40, 50-year-old cases have been solved because of DNA.
Okay.
And then lastly, my last point, this weekend in New York, IEDs were sent by post to members of the opposition. Within 3 days, that man was in custody. And the reason was because they found the DNA sample and they found his fingerprints on the envelope. I put it to you that would not necessarily happen here because we do not have the requisite database at the moment in this country.
Oh, help us with this then. I think that we've found acceptance from both of us. What is it? What is it? Is it a matter of money? Is it a matter of will? Is it a matter of knowledge as to the possibilities that technology infrastructure can add to security? How do you see it?
I see it as a lack of will, unfortunately.
On the part of?
That's for others to say, but let me say in terms of politically, I could produce things, for example, and I don't want to get too defensive on this, I can produce plans that I put in place back in 2005 on basics like always taking fingerprints, DNA, and always taking a photograph. These things are still not done as a matter of course. They are done sometimes, but they're not always done. And because of that, we don't even have a DNA database at the moment. We're still thinking about, will we buy CODIS, which is the FBI version, or will we buy another version? We should have been doing this 15 years ago. If we're taking crime seriously, the basics need to be done.
Well, let me tell you.
And we may not be in a situation where we need a state of emergency and ZOSOs, because catching people with the right evidence and also excluding those that are innocent, which is very important, is a prerequisite to good detection.
Okay. What about on the social side? The IDB tells us that we spend most of our money on the policing side and very little on the primary side.
Can we take that when we come back from the break
Yes.
with
Question.
Mark Shields
Yes.
and Raston Ham?
Yes.
And the key thing, because, you know, as far as those very rational requirements that Mark Shields puts forward, the legislature of this country for the last years of independence has never shied away from the most draconian measures. Yes, and therefore I don't think it's there, if it came forward, that you would find the reticence. And therefore we need to ask, where is the difficulty? Is it financial? Is it bureaucratic that's holding us back? And what needs to be done to bring it forward right now, as he suggests? This is a fascinating conversation on Power Talk this morning. Mark Shields, security consultant, lecturer at the CIN in Schaumburg, in Harlem, in New York recently. Soon come back. Talking with security consultant Mark Shields about the state of national security in the country. I want to use this segment to really discuss what we can do that we would make the police force more effective and make the whole climate of security better for all of us. So some of the measures that you've suggested, the technological measures, the infrastructural measures, you mentioned in your lecture the state of the police stations, the motor vehicles, the furniture that's given to a constable, yes, the uniform.
Yeah.
Hugely expensive, impossible, you think, to afford?
Not really. No, none of it is. I think, it comes back to a will and trying to depoliticise this, if there is such a word, if I can possibly do that.
Yes.
I've been here long enough and been through successive governments,
Yes.
and I have seen the dilapidated police stations, the vehicles that are driven around in. Sometimes we can blame the police and say they don't look after their equipment properly. But I don't think we should be in a position where police stations are infested with cockroaches and rats, where you walk in and the furniture is in a complete state of disrepair. What's the mindset for the police officer? And that's the point I was making. You know, we complain about their attitudes sometimes. We complain that they're corrupt.
Right.
But when you look at the package that they have and the way that they are treated, are we really surprised? Are we really surprised with that? And I think that with some real will, we can get the basics right, which will help. Having said that, I did go on to say that I think transformation is the only way forward. I think in order that we can really secure the trust and confidence within the police service, we will need to go through a transition similar to that in Northern Ireland. And I gave that example from the Royal Ulster Constabulary, which was a hated organisation in the 70s, 80s and 90s, and then the transition into the Northern Ireland Police Service, or the Police Service of Northern Ireland, which stats show people really respect the force. They're answered. They have trust and confidence in them. I believe that that transition is possible here, but it needs funds to do that, and that is a few $1 billion, without any shadow of a doubt. But if we're to match a growing economy, for which we can thank both PNP and JLP, because I said I think we can say that successive ministers of finance have done a reasonable job. We have the green shoots of recovery, but we need to make the investment in the police, because otherwise things will not happen. They're the front line.
Yeah.
If you don't fix the police, then you have a serious problem going.
But don't you believe simultaneously with that we need to be also making the investment in the communities, dilapidated police
100%.
stations in dilapidated communities? So we
100%.
have to be doing both simultaneously.
Dalston, it's absolutely imperative that you can't just think of law and order and enforcement.
Right.
It has to be supported by a strong social intervention. It has to happen, and we have to ensure that all of the partners are working together, and by that I mean education,
Yes.
I mean housing, employment, economic growth. All of those must work together to one common goal, to improve the lot of the poor man or woman living in some of these communities, and at the same time register the kids, get them into school, give the kids who have fallen through the gaps the right traded skills in trades, in order that we can produce some real jobs. All of that has to be done.
Let me sharpen the point, because you interact and have interacted with these people, this particular group. Mm-hmm. My view is, you see, Mark Shields, that if you had 500 more jobs in St. James to put people to work rather than be in a situation of idleness, mostly young men, but young women too, you wouldn't need a state of emergency for very long.
I agree. I totally agree. You've got to get that right.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, though, it seems the women do really well, because when you go to many places, even if you go to a bank, look at the tellers.
Yeah, man.
Yes.
Most of them are women. You go into other people's businesses, most of them are women.
Yeah.
Something is going on with the men folk here that we need to sort out.
And I think, you know, you've been a member of the police force, you're a consultant now, but it needs the law enforcement agencies and persons with that knowledge to say to the rest of us, particularly those that have any authority, listen now, you please give us the extra $1 billion to do the things that Mark Sheehan has itemized.
Yeah.
Yeah? But please, and you said it in your lecture, I've read it carefully, don't expect that alone is going to solve the problem.
Exactly.
Yes?
Yeah.
And it's not one after the other.
Simultaneously.
Is
At
it?
the same time.
Is it?
Absolutely.
Both at the same time.
Yes.
It has
yes.
to be.
The Inter-American Development Bank, rather
Yes.
than Pick Me Up,
Yes.
is saying you're putting too much on crime suppression
Right.
and not enough on crime reduction.
Precisely.
Do you share that view?
I think that that's a valid view.
Yes.
I think that, as I said, I think we disagreed on how much is being done. I'd like to think, and I do believe that things are being done, but not enough.
Yes.
And if
Bigger
you take,
and faster.
You take August-town, for
Yes.
example. When I was serving, we got to a stage of a peace treaty between the various gangs, and we went from a high murder rate to virtually 0 murders for a number of years. Fantastic news. But if you go back to August-town today, and I still go to August-town, and I still know the people there, nothing much has changed.
Precisely.
Where's been the real change?
Yes.
Why is it that, an area that could be a residential area for the hospitals,
sure.
for the universities, hasn't happened? These kids and teachers and nurses and doctors are travelling to Portmore because they don't want to live in August-town.
Precisely.
That is ridiculous.
Yes.
We should have an opportunity there, a simple opportunity to create something that is going to work.
Why do you think nothing has been done there? Is it because the connectivity between social transformation and security transformation haven't gone together? Let's use that. I was hoping August-town would have been the template for
I was
other...
hoping that.
Yeah.
I was hoping that. And I think that there was who was the PNP Member of Parliament there? Hilton.
Andre Hilton.
Yeah, Andre Hilton was
yes.
passionate about what he did. And I know now that Favour Williams spends a lot of time, and she's now got partly that political headache of getting that right. I know that she has some plans around CCTV, for example. But somehow I think that with all of the opportunities there is in terms of its geographic location, for whatever reason it hasn't happened.
Yeah,
Makes me disappointed
yes.
that we could have created, as you said, Ronnie, a template. And the other template would have been Tivoli Gardens after 2010, and that didn't work either. So something is going wrong between the enforcement part and getting the social investment part. And I think August-town was a classic that
So
we
let's
could have got
interrogate that, because I think this is what our listeners and viewers today, here and abroad, are expecting from this interview. Let's move from the something didn't work to what we think could work.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would want, I need to see people from each of those government agencies and non-government agencies sitting together around the table with the police as a player, but not as a chairperson. I would like to see opposition and government sitting at that table as well. And I want to see a plan of what we're going to do.
You're listening to what this man is saying?
I want to see a plan with what we're going to do with August-town in the next 12 months, 2 years and 5 years. I want to see a plan. And I want an analysis of how many people are unemployed, where the hotspots are,
Precisely.
where we're going to put the cameras.
Yes.
Let's put in ANPR as well. That's automated license plate reading, so that we know about every vehicle coming in and out. We have to create a safe environment for people to go about their business. This is not rocket science. It can be done. But we need to get the right people in the room to make it happen. And I believe that if you get it right somewhere like August-town, then we can move it on and just transplant that across.
Let me ask you this. All of this emphasis on technology demands a certain capacity within the police force. Does the Jamaica Constabulary Force, as you know it, have that capacity, or would we have to transform training, transform attitudes in order for the hardware, which we hope to, which we should afford, to really work?
It does not actually, Ronnie, take much.
It's not
for
high
ALPR.
yes.
Yes, the technology is sophisticated, but in terms of when a vehicle drives into August-town and it pings on a computer that this vehicle was involved in an armed robbery, maybe in Papine, or that the driver is a suspect drug trafficker, but no action is taken. But the fact is that if you can create environments, it will work. My example, and I know you're getting towards the end, so this is a really important point.
Please.
The City of London Police and the City of London, back in the 80s, we had 2 massive truck bombs. And the bombs blew out Bishopsgate down towards the Bank of England, and it looked like Hiroshima. That's how bad it was. The Japanese went to the Corporation of London and said, listen, if this happens again, we are leaving London and we're going to Frankfurt. The City of London Corporation, which I accept is a rich corporation, they put in the Ring of Steel, which I helped design. We closed off many of the side streets. We put cameras and ALPR 15 to 20 years ago at each entry and exit point, and the crime went down to 0, and we never had another terrorist attack, and the bank stayed. So things do work. They can work. Did the police have to be more sophisticated? Not really. It was the technology to support the police and their operations that actually worked effectively and reduced crime in the City of London.
So let's summarise then. Clearly then there are some very identifiable rather than measurable,
Yes.
at a stretch, Mark Shields says affordable technology, both at the level of the constable on the street, what he or she wears, looks like, has, etc., to what goes on when a person is taken into custody, to what is the paraphernalia in the communities, yes, that we need to budget, go for, insist now.
Right.
And without taking another breath, though I just did, there has to be a deepening and a broadening
within
of
the
opportunities for employment, training,
infrastructure development,
infrastructure in those communities. Yes, and that if that means turning around the whole skew of Jamaican finances, taxes, resources, it's worth it, because you said something ominous in that lecture, that unless we do this kind of thing, in another 14 years, another 20,000
people
may
will die.
Right.
Yes.
And that's unacceptable.
Absolutely.
You've shocked us, Mark Cheese, but you've done more than that. You've offered us some very positive recommendations. We're grateful to you. We hope to hear more.
Thank you for having
Mark
me.
Shields,
Thank you.
Security Consultant, formerly Deputy Commissioner of Police, Jamaican Englishman. We're happy to have him. What are your thoughts? You can phone us and tell us. When we come back, Rita Symes, she's a businesswoman, and she does export of Jamaican products, and she tells us that the potential is so great and so unrealized. And you know something? It's connected with what we've just been talking about. Because if we're producing more, employing more, giving people purposeful occupations, then we'll both be able to afford the things that Mark Shields has been telling us about, and perhaps the attitude will change. This is Power Talk on Power 106 with JNN. Welcome back to Power Talk Live on Power 106 and JNN, Jamaican News Network. A nice combination, you know, we're glad for it. And we're joined by Vincent Morrison, veteran trade unionist and president of the Union of Clerical, Administrative and Supervisory Employees, UK's, and one of the strongest, most outspoken trade unionists, may I say?
Yes,
Ralston?
at this particular point in time
in Jamaica.
Yes.
Vincent Morrison, good morning.
Good morning, Ronnie. Good morning, Ralston.
How you
and
doing?
of course, good morning, Peterson.
We have to count on you to defend the cause of organized labor, you know, because some people have lost their voice boxes in the struggles. I picked up a report where you were saying that China Harbour, which is this very impressive, well-funded institution that is doing so much civil works in Jamaica, to our benefit, I believe, needs to have a contract or a compact with labor. That surprises me. 56 years after independence, nearly 80 years after the labor movement, we have to be asking one of the largest participants in the country to recognize organized labor. Mr. Morrison?
Well, that is the real situation, Ronnie. The fact that we have a joint industrial council for construction should have made that task much easier, where foreign investors coming in should be told by the government of the day that there exist these arrangements, and these arrangements are well entrenched into our industrial relations history.
Pause a minute. Is the Joint Industrial Council a living, working body? And is it mandatory that persons engaged in the particular enterprise of construction, for example, interact with it, submit to it, or not?
Well, put it this way. The GIC for the construction industry, like other GICs that we have in the country, for example, in the shipping industry, Port of Kingston, in the sugar sector, in the bauxite, when bauxite was up and running. You remember the Mandate Accord?
Yes.
Among other agreements, does serve a very, very important process. It sets basic minimum standards, and when you apply those standards, then what it means is that you will not be engaged in day-to-day negotiations, or for that matter, day-to-day industrial strife at the workplace.
Who comprises this Joint Industrial Council in the construction industry, if you know? Does it meet regularly? And is it required, I ask again, for a company like China Harbour or any other company engaged in significant projects to interact and submit to them?
Well, you ask who comprised, and it's comprised of the vast majority of the companies that are involved in the construction industry, all the big companies in Jamaica, YPC, M&M Construction, all the big construction companies. You ask about the requirement for membership. Yes, companies are required to join. So that Bouygues, the French contractors who did Highway 2000, when they came, their first two their lawyers, one Mr. Conrad George, got in touch with us, both the BITU and ourselves, and we started with the company, work out what is to be worked out consistent with the provisions in the agreement, the GIC agreement, and very happy to tell you, Ronnie, that Mr. Noel Fullard, then general manager for Bouygues Construction,
excuse me,
when the Highway 2000 was open that morning, that Saturday morning, he said that they couldn't have done what they did in terms of finishing within budget, finishing within time, if it wasn't for the unions.
But that's the right way. That
is the correct way, Ronnie. That is the correct way.
So why
China Harbour has refused to join or get involved with the Giant Industrial Council. They have refused. They have decided to stay away from that. And that is where the problem is.
No, we have never. This is news to us, and we didn't know that.
Yeah, well, they have completely ignored.
Jamaica does not know that China Harbour has refused, according to Vincent Morrison, to engage with the Joint Industrial Council, which had the confidence not only of Jamaican contractors historically, and they make a part of it, I'm sure, and also of the French company Bouygues.
Yeah, that's what we have been talking for months. They have completely ignored all the regulations in relation to the joint.
I thought they'd just been left out.
No.
But what Vincent is saying, and you, is that they have said, to hell with you.
Yeah,
we won't have anything to do with you.
Completely ignored all of those
and that
regulations.
The government of the day, who after all, after everything contracts with them, has apparently allowed for that to take place.
Yes.
Is that the truth, Vincent Morrison? Is that the bottom line of what we are saying today?
That is facts.
Not hearing you.
We lost Mr. Morrison.
We lost his volume, if not himself. Could you please try and see if you can restore him?
Yeah, but that's the situation. They have completely ignored the Joint Industrial Council, and the Ministry of Labour, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Development have steadfastly refused
no, you can't have that,
to rein them in.
Because then the role of the opposition would be to say to the government, or which it doesn't matter who is the government and who is opposition, but you can't have that kind of contempt. Vincent Morrison is more serious than I thought.
It is very serious. Ronnie.
Why haven't your union colleagues made an issue out of this. It's not that we're vexed with them, but they simply can't come in and do what they please.
Right,
Ronnie,
well, that's what they've been doing.
We have. The last industrial problem we had out there, we tried to contact members of the government, including Mr. Vaz. And a meeting was scheduled, and then the meeting was just postponed, abruptly postponed. The latest in the whole thing, we have written to the permanent secretary in the office of the Prime Minister, requesting that she get the stakeholders together so that we can deal with the matter.
No, but these people have been in Jamaica now for years.
Ronnie. You mentioned the opposition. I'm glad you did, because I think the opposition has a role to play.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and they haven't been saying anything about.
Be happy.
They haven't been saying anything about this either.
Ralston.
Yes.
We would be happy to hear a voice in Parliament.
Yes.
Raising some questions about this thing, because, let me just say, China Harbour is going to be here for a long time.
Yes.
Huh? The St. Thomas projects and a number of other projects.
Right. And is it that we're experiencing a similar situation in the hotel industry? It's not just in terms of the construction industry and China Harbour. There's a general erosion and lack of respect for the trade union movement. What do you believe contributed to that at the micro and macro level?
I want you to give me a little opportunity to talk about Gisco Alpart.
Okay, go ahead.
Because we served claim in May this year. We were told by the Ministry of Labour in August, early August, that we made a prima facie case, which means that a poll must be held. And we have been waiting for 3 months now. 3 months. The latest we heard from the ministry is that the voters list was sent to China.
Sent to where?
China.
No, brethren, no, I don't understand. First of all, step back a little for me. Gisco is the Chinese company which bought out Alpart and is doing this impressive development in southeastern St. Elizabeth, which is trumpeted as being the future of the...
Game changer.
Game changer, it's been called by some over-enthusiastic people, and I hope it is. And your request for the Jamaican workers to be allowed...
Unionized.
To be unionized, which is their legal right, okay? That has to go to China for approval, big man?
That is the latest I heard.
Well, you better let me take the station break and catch my breath here, because if that is the case, viewers, listeners, Vincent Morrison, government, what is the meaning of our sovereignty and independence?
Yes.
Okay? Does money rule everything? And what kind of understanding? I'm wanting to be very respectful of our Chinese friends and investors. What kind of understanding were they given when they came here?
Precisely.
Or when this contract was signed?
Right.
As to the treatment of Jamaican people?
Precisely.
Yes?
And
hello, the Middle Passage finished a long time ago, you know. This can't be right.
Can't be right. And that is
Vincent
what we're saying.
Morrison is telling us things that we didn't want to hear. We're talking about the rights of labor. We're talking about just the ordinary human rights of Jamaican people.
Yes.
This is Power Talk Live, and we'll soon come back. Talking with Vincent Morrison on Power Talk Live. He's the president of the Union of Clerical, Administrative and Supervisory Employees, UK's. Vincent Morrison, I cut you off a little earlier. So the request for union representation at Gisco in St. Elizabeth has gone to China.
We were told.
So what's next?
We have been waiting 3 months. And first we were told that the company, the ministry was processing other claims. We waited.
Other claims what? You mean they didn't have enough time to do yours?
What you understand, the other unions had served claim.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
So our position was that we don't have a problem. We want to let the union so the workers could make their own choice.
So they have gone to China too?
Well, maybe, I don't know.
No, but Vincent, we're getting annoyed now because the Ministry of Labour is in favor of Jamaican workers, yes? And the Ministry of Labour must be helping Jamaican workers, not to be outlandish, not to be extortionate, but to get what is their rights. Then that's not incidental to our democracy. That is the fuel, that is the source on which Jamaica moved from colonialism to independence.
And can I just add to that, Ronnie? If you have all the money that is in Fort Knox, if you don't have workers, that money don't have any use.
Correct. Many people don't believe that. Many people believe the workers are a part of the problem rather than a part of the solution. Now, what is your assessment as to what has led to the erosion of respect for the trade union movement at the micro and macro level, and how is it that you are going to restore that respect?
Well, the crave for foreign investment,
yes,
is
macro
maybe
policy.
one of the main issues.
Right. That's at the macro level,
words,
yes.
The foreign investors are so needed, are so important, that you give them all that they ask for, whether it's
the whole shop,
whether it's violation of your labor laws. I mean, how could we allow a China harbor to be operating here? And the little NIS money that they're supposed to take from the workers, the housing trust money, so that some sort of social protection can be provided for the workers in their when they retire. That has not been done. This is a project, is 191 billion Jamaican dollars.
Yes.
It is?
Yeah, man. Almost 10% of
workers,
GDP.
When that's finished, the workers cannot show a cent. The workers don't get pay slips.
No, but we have laws, don't we?
They are not
what is it that everybody is on contract and not employed, and therefore we use that spurious device
yes.
In order to absolve ourselves from making statutory deductions. And if any Jamaican company or individual did that, where would they end up?
Well, the imbalance is very clear.
Right.
We give the foreign companies all the breaks, but we complain about the small business.
Yes.
Who get a little break here and there. It's not fair.
Right. But internally, what is it that you believe that the trade union movement is not doing, Mr. Morrison?
I think the trade union movement, and I hate to have to say this, but it's a fact, you don't have the cohesion that exists years ago.
Okay.
You don't have the cohesion that exists years ago. It looks like a rat race. For example, we served claim for bargaining rights on Moon Palace in Oteras. We got the voters list. We had some objections, waiting for those objections to be settled so we can have a date for the poll. And then we hear another union is at the gate organizing the work, trying to persuade the workers to join their union.
Okay.
So the cohesion is not there. The unity is not there. The respect amongst the leadership is not there.
So what is it that...
And if that continues, it will be very, very difficult.
So what is the foundation on which Hugh Lawson Shearer, Michael Manley, Tassie Kelly, Lascelles Beckford, Sir Alexander himself, yes? All of the other greats of the Carlisle Dunkley of the trade union movement.
Not all of them.
Kevin,
all right,
Lord
Thompson.
Goodley.
Yeah.
Yes, all of these people.
Yes.
Did they struggle in vain
don't
to
leave out
see...
Tassie Kelly.
Pardon?
Tassie Kelly, yes.
Don't
I
leave out
remember.
Red Jennings.
These people know who their struggles are now being reversed, and Labour being treated in this cavalier fashion. We're not even basic.
It is being reversed from within and inside and outside.
Right.
Why?
Because the movement itself is not cohesive. we are not sitting down together, bearing the hatchet, but don't mark the spot.
Okay. So what about the role of the ULAS, the Trade Union Education Institute, and the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions in
And what
dealing
about
with this problem?
this body that was set up in Morrison called Peace Stock, that Danny Roberts is heading? This was supposed to engineer social equity in the midst of financial restructuring.
Yes, yes.
I haven't heard anything. What's your view?
Well, I myself haven't heard much about that. But what has happened is that the leadership of the are not getting together like in the old days.
Yes.
Discussing issues, working through issues, coming up with a common agenda. And if that is not done, we're going to have problems.
Yeah.
We're going to have problems because the likes like China Harbor, like what we have in Ajisco as we speak, all of these issues are going to be even more challenges because the Ministry of Labor no longer have a two in hands. It no longer have a Gressford Senate. And
Ben Francis.
Right? I don't want to say much about the leadership of the ministry, but I would love to see more hands-on leadership of the Ministry of Labor.
Vincent Morrison, the impression was given to the
coming
public.
from the permanent secretary right across the board.
Yes.
The impression was given to the public that after the recent activism on the civil projects at Portia Simpson Miller Square, etc., that there was a new resolve by China Harbor, in fact, to sit down with the unions and with the Joint Industrial Council. Is that a correct impression? And if so, has it begun, or was it just simply mouth talk?
Well, I don't think any assurance was given by China Harbor that they would sit down with the Joint Industrial Council. That is why...
Are they paying wages commensurate with JIC rates now?
No.
Well, my understanding is that the workers are supposed to be paid this week. What they told me is that at the end of this week, they will know exactly...
What do you mean? You can't find out after your work? What do you mean?
No,
they will find
no.
out then. Vin Morrison...
Lack of organization.
What is this?
No. Hold on. What the workers have said, they are paid on a fortnightly basis.
Right.
So they would know,
Why they
if there
wouldn't
are
know?
errors. They would know
They're
if
supposed
there
to know
are
in
errors.
advance before they pick up their shovel.
Well, these are some of the things that we've been talking about.
Yes.
Boy,
That
Jamaica
man should
really
get a
gone down, you know.
payslip.
Yeah, man.
He should have get a pay slip days before.
Yeah.
He goes to the bank to encash a card. That's what we've been talking about, and we're not getting any.
And all of the discussion that was supposed to happen a couple of weeks ago didn't clear up all of that?
No, because we did not meet with. Remember, we wanted to meet with the office of the Prime Minister.
And that meeting never took place.
We were shifted to the National Works Agency.
Oh.
That meeting was held. That is why we had to route back to the office of the Prime Minister, to the Permanent Secretary, requesting that she get the stakeholders together to deal with a memorandum of understanding.
And that hasn't happened.
We are still waiting on a response from them.
Okay.
Well, I tell you, the picture is a dismal picture, viewers and listeners. This is so contrary to what has been the compact and understanding between the leaders of organized labor. And indeed, let's give them credit. People in the Employers Federation, yes, they're professionals, lawyers and otherwise. Vin Morrison has told us the experience with Boeing. But we are reversing the advances of 50 years of history.
Yes.
Yes? And it is happening imperceptibly. If it were not for an interview like this, on a program like this, we might not have understood how deep is the distress and how unwarranted the oppression that is being visited upon these workers. They can't get a pay slip, they can't know in advance whether they're being paid on JIC rates, yes? And they are being told, as we reported, and apparently accurately, that who want to work, go work, who don't want to work, take care of yourself. That's the way we're doing it. And that an opportunity request, a legitimate LRIDA-based request for union representation has to be sent to China before it can be adjudicated and allowed here in Jamaica. That is nonsense.
And do you believe that you can get inclusive growth under these conditions?
But I'm ashamed of government that allows this.
Yes.
Vincent Morrison, do you have any supporters in the trade union movement, in the society as a whole? We are offering you succor, but is there another version or any other?
Ronnie, my supporters, are the workers of Jamaica. What is going to happen at Alpart, the workers are going to walk off of the job.
That would be so unfortunate and yet so predictable.
And you're going to hear that the union is mashing up this and it's mashing up that. But the workers have patiently wait, and I can't guarantee that the workers are going to stay on the job. So I am hoping that certainly by the end of this week, we will get some. But are we asking for, is the law to be applied, around
Yes, laws of the land.
Yes, so Mr. Morrison, time has run out on us, so we strongly support what you're saying. Hope that we can hear some good news. Vincent Morrison.
Ronnie,
yes.
I would want to hear some questions in the house about these matters.
Your point is taken. Listen up carefully. President of the Union of Clerical, Administrative and Supervisor Employees, Vincent Morrison. There's more on Power Talk Live when we come back. Welcome back to Power Talk Live. We're now joined by Mrs. Rita Hilton. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Carita, and they are exporters of Jamaican fresh produce and processed produce. And we're going to concentrate on the solutions. We're looking at the potential for export of Jamaican produce. We believe on this program that unless we transform the agricultural sector, and unless that grows and we earn foreign exchange and substitute for foreign exchange, the economy really can't grow. So that's the bent of this discussion. Rita, morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good
Thank
morning,
you very
Ronnie.
much
Good
for
morning,
coming.
Morning.
Nice to be here.
Glad to have you.
Tell us the story. We know that companies like yours are engaged in putting Jamaican products on the U.S. market, but most of the people listening to us, even those listening to us from abroad, may not understand what is the demand, what is the range, what is the allurement of what we produce in Jamaica. What are the possibilities?
Well, we could do this forever, for a long time, because I'm so passionate about the fact that Jamaican produce has unique flavor and taste. It also has some very extensive connotations in terms of our culture, in terms of our music. So we have a mystique that is Jamaica, and we have to capitalize on that. Brand Jamaica is known amazingly all over the world. I was in a remote part of the Masai Mara, and when people heard I came from Jamaica, they started singing songs of Jimmy Cliff and Bob Marley, and this is in a remote part of Kenya.
Yes.
Right? So we were also in Malaya, and we see a little club that says Bob Marley in the middle of high-rise building, the Petronas Towers.
Yes.
So we're known all over the world, as little as we are. And I see agriculture as a way of lifting this country out of poverty. So we have been to many food shows with our products, and most recently, my assistant has come back from a food show in Paris, the CIAL show coordinated by the Caribbean Export Development Agency in Barbados. And do you know, I want to share this with both of you and with our audience. I had a wonderful letter that said, we have our headquarters in Dubai, we saw your products, we are in Holland, we love your products, we want to work with you, what are the opportunities? We also I went to Chile with a food show there.
Okay.
And there again, for the nutraceuticals, people are bringing from India, they'd like to bring from the Caribbean. So the potential is there, and we need to start to work to bring all the elements together to make this a reality. Let's put people to work, let's lift our people out of poverty, and let's get ahead as a country.
What are the things in most demand?
Our food is in big demand. You know, Bolt put a tremendous mystique on his winning and his sprinting capability with yam that came from Trelawney. And the day after he broke all those 3 records, there was a contingent that came in from Japan in the middle of a hurricane and wanted to go to Sherwood to see where he came from. And the week after, we were shipping yam to Japan for them to experiment and do product development. Okay, so
how is that going before you go on?
Well, we hit some snags with product development. So we haven't given up. We're still working on that.
Okay.
And we
Do
need
we
to
have enough yam to satisfy the market?
No.
Somewhere else you told me that others are impersonating or...
Absolutely. There's yam coming from Africa, from Ghana. There's yam coming from Costa Rica. And because our yam is so high priced, because it's scarce right now, what the importers are doing is mixing the African yam with the Costa Rican yam, putting it in Jamaican boxes and saying product of Jamaica.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we are foregoing that income
Yes.
because we are not growing sufficient
growing
yam
enough. We're
in
not growing
order
enough.
to be able.
Yeah.
Yes. And pumpkins, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's in bags that says pumpkin with Jamaican seeds.
With Jamaican seeds.
Seeds from Jamaican seeds. So the flavor is unique, and we really need to stop talking and start working to make all this a reality. What is a reality?
Yes.
We need to have more production. We need to lower our cost of production. It is too high. The energy is high. The cost of moving product from rural areas with insufficient roads, bad roads, and bringing it to focal points. We need to establish the grades and standards that they do. For example, in first world countries. In Holland, you have to go and study for 2 years before you're qualified to be an exporter. Here, anybody can go to Jampro, get a letter, go to plant quarantine, say that we are exporters. We are exporters. So the grades, a supplier will bring yam to me and say, it's too difficult. You are too stringent in your grading and your standards. If I take it to somebody else, they'll take everything that you're rejecting. So we need to establish these grades and standards. We need to have proper practices, good agricultural practices, so that we can enter into any first world country, any Caribbean country, without, there'll be no borders. There are no borders. And we need to get proper packaging. We need to get creative packaging. What is in demand? The yams are in demand. Dasheen is in demand. And you can get cheaper dasheen from other countries, yet they keep asking for Jamaican dasheen. Right? We need to capitalize on that. We need to, there's dasheen. There is the sweet potato. Amazing. Sweet potato has such amazing nutritional qualities. And Jamaican sweet potatoes, not the Covingtons, not the Beauregards, the Jamaican sweet potatoes are in demand. But again, we have to bring our cost of production, we have to apply technology. So I'm giving you solutions. We need to apply technology, we need to bring the cost of production so that we can compete, and compete favorably, not with cheap prices, with reasonable prices, so that we can reach a wide section of the population. It's not only the elite that can afford Jamaican product. We've been adding value, so we have 3 gluten-free flours. We do sweet potato, breadfruit, and cassava flour. And I just had a Facebook page where a client of ours, a customer of ours in London, was touting pancakes made with cassava flour from Carita Jamaica Limited. And we're only touching
the surface.
A minimal percentage of the surface. It's there. It's available.
Raston Hyman loves to remind us that we were exporting twice the value of our present exports 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Can we recover that? Is the market out there simply an ethnic market, or do we have crossover products? You seem to be saying so. What are some of the marketing challenges? Is it just supply and price? Those are big enough. What should we be doing now?
First of all, I think we should have all our farms GAP certified. Farmers must adhere to recording their chemicals, their fertilizers, everything that's applied as it is applied on the farm. We should have a certifying body to say that this is food safe and then you're opening up more markets.
Okay.
You're crossing ethnic lines. You're going wider than, and sweet potatoes is one product that has crossed ethnic lines. You know, we need to reach out to people to say, you don't only have to put yam in soup, you can do yam souffle,
Value
you
added.
can do
Adding more value.
Yam porridge, you can do all kinds of
all
things.
kinds of things
Yeah.
with it, right? Breadfruit
Yes.
is another product that has so much potential. You know, we're being reached out by the Hawaiian populations that's saying, ship us breadfruit off season. We want fermented breadfruit flour. We want to make ulu. We want to make all kinds of things. And we are reaching out to us. Can you supply? Can you supply frozen breadfruit, boiled breadfruit, roasted breadfruit, all kinds of, and all of these are not primary exports. We must get away from, we must add value.
More value, yes.
Let's stop shipping
yes.
raw commodities.
Agreed.
And here's a solution to doing that. For that, we need to be able to have a knowledge of state-of-the-art equipment that is affordable to smaller economies, that you know, it's adaptable to communities,
Yes.
it's adaptable to small areas of production, so that we can spread the adding value, creating jobs into the communities, and then have a collection point.
Correct.
You know, it mustn't be Carita that makes money,
Yes.
or Grace Kennedy that makes money, takes the raw material and transforms it. It must be those rural communities
Inclusive,
that become partners
Yes.
in the whole process. Okay?
Is that really affordable? Is it, what kind of organization would it take? How much capital, and from where might it come in an arena of the Jamaican economy, Ham and Rita Hilton, that doesn't provide much capital for agriculture at all? And do we have the expertise that would make these possible? These are the kinds of questions we need to ask after the break. This is the way Jamaica's economy is going to move forward. This is the way rural society is going to be transformed. This is the way that we're going to provide real employment and growth for our society and for our economy. We
deal with crime on a sustainable basis.
Indeed.
Connectivity.
That is the connectivity.
Yes.
Connectivity between all of the subjects we've had on Power Talk
Right.
today. We'll soon come back. Rita Hilton of Carissa about the potential of Jamaican exports. What about fruit, Rita? Is there a demand for Jamaican fruit?
There is.
Are you getting help from official sources when you need to pass through quarantine and other requirements?
There's a huge potential for fruits. You know, if you look at one fruit, which is soursop, this has been touted to have tremendous cancer healing properties, whether it's the tea from the leaves and the stems, the fruit, the juice, the pulp. It has such tremendous potential. And I have every day people calling me, put it in a bag, freeze it, and send it to us. They're doing it in the Dominican Republic, all these countries. If you take DomRep as an example, 20 years ago, they made a decision for food security. Today, they supply 80% of all the peppers consumed from Miami to Boston. 80%.
Yes.
Right? Because they put all the things in place that needed to be done.
Right.
The standards, the marketing, the collection, the packaging, all of those elements. And why can't we? There are naseberries, soursop, custard apples, mangoes. Mangoes. We missed a deadline to get back into the UK market.
Okay.
Because of bureaucracy. The last
Hello,
last
we missed
part
a
of the
deadline to get back into the UK market.
Yes,
Because
with the
of
sample
bureaucracy.
shipment.
Because of bureaucracy.
Correct.
And then we wonder why we're poor, why the foreign exchange is weak. All of the time we spend discussing those things, and this is the only antidote to
Precisely.
produce more that we can sell.
Yeah, for that season. I mean, now we're delayed another season till next year, March. Okay?
Yeah, look how
So-
much waste has
Yeah.
Yes.
been
happens
incurred.
with that, you know. And as I say, the fruits, there are nurseries that can generate production, but Ronnie, we cannot give a lone farmer one tree because he can't protect it. We need some orchard. There are sugarcane lands being divested.
Yes.
These should be devoted to mango production,
Precisely.
jackfruit production.
Yes.
Jackfruit has huge potential.
Really?
Dried fruit, green fruit to make vegan dishes.
Yes.
The ripe fruit to be dried or eaten fresh. It's huge potential. And there are varieties that we know in the world that have less latex, that have more flesh, that have less of the material, waste material.
Okay.
So it's there. We don't have to rediscover it. We need a unit to see where those varieties are. We need to form alliances to bring the varieties in and start growing.
Would it help, Rita Hilton, if we had, let me use for shorthand, a revived agricultural marketing corporation where people could bring their produce and companies like yours that processes, that exports, could come and secure?
Off, yeah.
I would like to see it not as one central unit, but you would have one, say, in Manchester,
Okay.
one in St.
You've been saying
Elizabeth,
that.
Yes, yes.
one in Portland,
Right across the country.
in
Yeah.
different, maybe 6 or 7
Right.
good centers,
Yes.
managed by people who understand export marketing and local marketing, and who can do the grades and do the thing and have the intelligence. You need the intelligence.
Yeah.
This season, this is coming on, and it's available here, right? We need the research to see what diseases are affecting the production of cocoa, what is affecting the production of sweet yam. Sweet yam is virtually dying out because there's a disease affecting the vines. Where is the support? These are the solutions we need. Proper research. How do you preserve the yam? There's a season when yam develops a kind of black streak through the center. We've made several submissions from the export trade, from the JEA when it was functioning, to say, investigate this, set up the research. Maybe the exporters will come together and fund the research to it. You get private sector supporting it. So there are solutions.
But we
Why
have
are we still
universities, we
Yeah.
have a scientific research
Yes.
council,
Yes.
we have RADA,
Rather.
but we don't seem to be able to get it together.
No. And do you know, I don't know if this is still so. Scientific Research Council is sitting on formulations of a number of products.
Yes.
Okay, so one person paid maybe to do the initial research. If you come and say, I want to get this kind of research, you pay the same amount of money as the initial research. Now, how many small communities
Can do that.
can afford to do that? Why is this research sitting there
Yes.
when it should be made available to especially community organizations to increase production?
Yeah.
And then we have to help the community organization for label development. You have a very good label production, graphic work in Jamaica. I'm sure we can get a partnership to help produce first-class, world-class labels
Yes.
and production to these communities and to support them.
There are
Because
those-
very often they have great products,
Yes.
but the
packaging
marketing
is
link and the
poor.
packaging is
Yeah.
very poor.
There are those who assert that the Jamaican farm produce, processed or raw, is too high priced, and that in fact the prices that are offered by people like yourself, others, are not economical to the farmer because of the expenses of cultivation, etc. Is that still an issue, or
Yes.
is that not so?
It is an issue. I think for the first time since I've been in business, which is 30 years, I saw yam being sold or demanded for $200 a pound. Which person abroad or locally can afford to pay that when every other country is half that price or less?
Yes.
Right? What is causing this? This is causing by fluctuations in production, caused maybe by drought, causing by machete technology instead of
Yes.
using proper technology.
Yes.
There are ways of bringing production. There are ways of bringing farmers into a mode where we are producing to satisfy local as well as overseas demand. I'm not saying that we should only supply overseas people. We must be food secure. How many people can go to market and buy a piece of yam for $200?
Very
How
few.
many people can pay $100 a pound for pumpkin? It's not acceptable.
Yes. Yes.
It's not acceptable. Are we going to feed our people or not? We must find ways of producing at reasonable, which will
Cost.
give the farmers
Yes.
a return on their investment and also feed our people.
What is the intermediary role of the various organizations of state and privately? I want to know if companies like yours, interests, are able to interact with, is it RADA, the Jamaica Agricultural Society, the other ones, PMOs, whatever it is. Is there a kind of networking of business that can be part of the solution, can take us forward in this area?
Well, I would like to see that. It's not happening right now. We are supposed to have technology which was being formulated by RADA,
Yes.
which would tell you what is going into the ground, what time it will be available. And we've been talking about this for the last 10 years. It hasn't happened.
It's not happening.
It's not happening unless you do your own intelligence. And many exporters form relationships with individual farmers that understand marketing, that understand production, and will hold a price. For example, I have a very good market in New York for Scotch bonnet peppers. I have the same price for the last 10 years to them.
Okay.
And I have the same price to my farmers. And I have 2 or 3 farmers that I can vouch with RADA that they have stick to their schedules that they have given us and which are regularly inspected. And so it's safe. The product is safe for consumption.
Okay.
And the price doesn't change. And they will call me and say, my product is ready, my product is ready. And we work together. So unless you form those kinds of relationships with people who understand why you have to get into the marketplace at a steady
Certain,
price,
precisely.
be consistent
Yes.
in your quality and your pricing, it won't work.
Yeah.
Rita Hilton, dream for us in the couple of minutes we have left. What could this industry be in 5 years' time? What could it mean for Jamaica? What could it mean for rural economy?
Ronnie, I have such big dreams for
Exactly,
agriculture.
want to hear them.
I have such big dreams. I know that immediately I could triple my exports,
Okay.
which is close to 3 million US a year.
Okay.
I could triple it
It could move to 9 or 10.
without any problems if I had the production. Right? I could triple it, and that means that that would increase earning power for so many farmers, for so many families. But this wide fluctuation in pricing that you're not consistent, and people, our buyers say, you can't hold a price for 1 week.
Yeah.
You can't hold a price. You're calling us in the middle of the week to say the price is gone.
Yeah.
Right? So if you can hold your price, if you can be consistent in your quality, and we can as a people do all these things. Let's put the elements in place to make it happen. I know that agriculture can lift this country. Not only the tubers, the fruits, the nutraceuticals, and now cannabis. The application of cannabis in the right for medicinal purposes can lift this country out of poverty. And it won't take long.
Yes.
2 years and we're gone. Dramatic results.
And it lies within our resources.
To do.
It lies
Yes.
within our
Yes.
wit.
There is money in this
Yes.
country to do it.
We have started already. It's a matter of expanding what we're doing and doing it better. Rita Hilton, thank you so much. We admire your passion and your focus on these matters.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
hope that we will be able to learn lessons from what she has said and indeed from all of our interviews today. This has been Power Talk Live on JNN and Power 106. We bring together radio and television, you see, so that you can get the full measure of all of the issues that can help us to move forward individually and move Jamaica forward also. I'd like to thank all of our listeners and all of those who, here and abroad, who make this program possible. Please remember that Power Talk will continue on Power 106 after the midday break. Many thanks to co-host Ralston Hammond of Real Business for his participation. Join us again next time when we bring the issues of the day to you, offer the data, bring the analysis, and hope that it can light a spark, keep a blaze of fire for progress in this country. Thanks very much. See you later.
Living in the positive, and I know good will conquer evil. Living in the positive, what you do, let not your hearts be troubled. Wipe away your tears and fears, 'cause I know love will conquer evil. Yeah. Living in the, and be living in the positive.